Let me ask you something. How much longer are you going to carry what's been weighing you down? How long will you let old pain, negative thoughts, and past mistakes control how you show up today? Because here's the truth. It's not what happened to you that's holding you back. It's what you're holding on to. Right now, in this moment, you have more power than you've ever used. The question is not whether you can change, but whether you're willing to let go of what no longer serves you, because the life you want is waiting. On the other side of that decision, most people think the things holding them back are obvious. They point to money, circumstances, other people, bad luck, or the economy. But that's not the real problem. The most powerful forces shaping your life are the ones you don't see. They're invisible, they're familiar, and because they're familiar, you stop questioning them. You stop challenging them. You start obeying them without even realizing it. These invisible chains are the beliefs you accepted years ago without examining whether they were true. A comment someone made about you when you were young, a failure that happened once and somehow turned D into a lifelong label. A moment of rejection that quietly taught you don't try too hard or don't expect too much. Or people like you don't get to win. You didn't choose those beliefs consciously, but once they took root, they began running your life. Here's the truth. You are not reacting to life as it is. You are reacting to life as you believe it is. And those beliefs act like a filter. They determine what you notice, what you ignore, what you attempt, and what you avoid. Two people can experience the exact same event, and one sees opportunity while the other sees proof that they should quit. The difference isn't ability, it's interpretation. And the most dangerous part? These beliefs don't feel like beliefs. They feel like facts. They sound like logic. They sound like I'm just being realistic. But realism without vision is just another form of fear. When you tell yourself, that's just how I am, or that's just how life works, what you're really saying is, I've stopped believing I can change this. That sentence alone can quietly imprison you for decades. Your brain's job is not to make you successful. Its job is to keep you safe, so it looks for patterns. It clings to what's known, even if what's known is painful. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. That's why people stay in situations they hate, tolerate standards they'd never accept for someone they love, and repeat behaviors they know are holding them back. Not because they want to suffer, but because suffering has become predictable. These invisible chains show up as hesitation, as overthinking, as that voice that says, what if it doesn't work? Before you ever ask, what if it does? They show up as settling, as lowering your expectations just enough to avoid disappointment. And over time, that becomes your identity. You don't just say, I failed. You say, I'm not the kind of person who succeeds. And once identity is involved, change feels threatening. But here, it's clearly a belief is nothing more than a habit of thought you've practiced for a long time. And anything you've practiced, you can interrupt, you can question it, you can replace it. The moment you bring awareness to these invisible chains, they start to lose their power. You don't have to fight them, you just have to see them for what they are. Start noticing the language you use with your cell. Not the words you use when others are listening, but the private ones, the automatic ones, the ones that show up when you're tired, stressed, or challenged. Those words reveal the rules you're living by, and most people are living by rules they never consciously chose. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Who taught me this? What did it protect me from at the time? Because many of SA beliefs were formed to help you survive, not to help you thrive. They may have kept you safe once, but now they're keeping you small, and survival rules are very different from success rules. The moment you realize that the voice in your head is not the truth, but a pattern, you regain power. You stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the architect of your future. Awareness is not weakness. Awareness is leverage. You cannot change what you pretend isn't there, but the second you name it, you can challenge it. And here's the breakthrough. You don't have to eliminate every negative belief today. You just have to stop letting them run your life unconsciously. When you catch a limiting thought and say, that's not a fact, that's a story, you create space. And in that space, choice is born. This is where real change begins, not with motivation, not with force, but with clarity. Because once you see the change, you realize something empowering, they were never locked. And the moment you see them clearly, you can finally decide to take them off. Let me ask you something. How many times have you been physically safe in the present moment, yet emotionally trapped in some? A thing that happened years ago? Your body may be here, but your mind keeps traveling back in time, replaying moments that are already over. Not because they matter now, but because they once hurt. And every time you replay them, you're not remembering the past, you're reliving it. The mind doesn't know the difference between something happening now and something vividly imagined. So when you rehear an old failure, an argument, a betrayal, or a moment of embarrassment, your nervous system reacts as if it's happening again. The same tension, the same frustration, the same self-doubt. And without realizing it, you train your brain to live in a constant state of emotional stress over events that no longer exist. Most people don't suffer because of what's happening today. They suffer because they keep dragging yesterday into today. They wake up and immediately remind themselves of what went wrong, who hurt them, what they lost, or what they should have done differently. And then they wonder why they feel heavy, unmotivated, or stuck. It's because energy follows focus. Whatever you consistently focus on, you feel. And whatever you feel, you act from. Here's the truth most people don't want to face. The past has no power on its own. It only has the power you give it through repetition. The event is over. The meaning is not. You keep the wound alive by replaying the story and reinforcing the emotion. That doesn't mean what happened wasn't real or painful. It means you've been paying an emotional tax long after the debt was due. Ask yourself this: what is reliving the past costing? You? Not in theory, but in real life. How much confidence has it stolen? How many opportunities have you avoided because you didn't want to feel that pain again? How many relationships have been affected because you're still reacting to someone who isn't even in the room anymore? When you let the past run your present, you don't see the world as it is. You see it through the lens of what happened before. You expect disappointment, so you interpret neutral situations as threats. You expect rejection, so you hold back before anyone has the chance to say no. You don't wait for life to happen, you brace for it. And bracing is exhausting. But here's the shift that changes everything. You can learn from the past without living in it. Growth doesn't require emotional suffering. Wisdom does not deep. Man's self-punishment. You can extract the lesson and release the pain. The moment you say, I've learned what I needed to learn, you give yourself permission to move forward without dragging the emotional weight behind you. Most people believe letting go means forgetting or excusing what happened. That's not what it means. Letting go means you stop allowing the past to dictate how you feel today. It means you stop using an old chapter as the headline for your entire life. You don't deny it. You just stop giving it authority over your emotions. Think about it. If you were guiding someone you love, would you tell them to keep punishing themselves for something that already happened? Would you tell them to keep reopening a wound so it never heals? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what many people do to themselves every single day. Your brain learned to associate certain memories with danger. It's trying to protect you by saying, remember this so it doesn't happen again. But protection turns into limitation when you confuse caution with fear. You don't need to relive the pain to remember the lesson. You just need a new emotional response. This is where choice comes in. The next T, a painful memory surfaces. Instead of diving into it, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what do I choose to focus on right now? That question interrupts the pattern. And interruption is power. You may not be able to control the memory, but you can control how long you stay there. Over time, the grip loosens, the emotional charge fades, and you begin to experience something most people rarely feel: lightness. Not because your life is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying what doesn't belong in the present. And wow! You stop rehearsing the pain of the past. You create space for something extraordinary, the ability to fully show up now with energy, clarity, and strength. Because the moment you decide the past no longer gets a vote in how you live today, you reclaim your future. Now let's talk about something that is shaping your life every single day, whether you realize it or not. It's not your circumstance. It's not your past. It's the conversation you're having with yourself. Because long before you ever take an action, long before you feel confident or afraid, you speak to yourself. And those words are not harmless. They are commands. Most people would never allow someone else to talk to them the way they talk to themselves. The criticism, the doubt, the constant reminders of what went wrong. Why? Because the voice is internal, they treat it as truth instead of what it really is, a habit. And that habit, repeated over time, becomes your emotional home. Every word you speak to yourself carries emotional weight. Your brain responds to language instantly. When you tell yourself, I can't, your body collapses. When you tell yourself, this is too much, your breathing changes, your shoulder tighten, your energy drops. But when you shift the language even slightly, your physiology shifts with it. And when your physiology changes, your possibilities expand. You don't think your way into new behavior. You speak your way into it. Language creates focus. Focus creates emotion. Emotion drives action. That's the chain. And if you want to change the direction of your life, you have to interrupt the chain at the level of language. Here's where people get stuck. They believe their self-talk is just being honest. They say, I'm not being negative, I'm being realistic. But realism without empowerment is just a story that keeps you safe from disappointment. It keeps expectations low, effort minimal, and regret high. The question is not whether your inner dialogue is accurate. The quest ion is whether it's useful. Your identity is shaped by the words you repeatedly use to describe yourself. If you say, I'm not confident, your mind searches for proof. If you say, I always mess this up, your brain finds evidence. Whatever you tell yourself consistently, you condition yourself to become. And once something becomes part of your identity, you defend it, even if it's hurting you. But here's the breakthrough. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. And the moment you realize that, you regain control. That voice learned its tone over years through repetition, through emotion, through experience. And anything learned can be unlearned and replaced. The goal is not to lie to yourself or pretend everything is perfect. The goal is to speak in a way hat moves you forward instead of shutting you down. There's a massive difference between saying, I'm terrible at this, and saying, I'm learning. One creates tension and fear. The other creates curiosity and growth. Notice how high performers talk to themselves under pressure. They don't say, I'm going to fail. They say, focus. They don't say, this is impossible. They say, what's my next move? That language directs the mind toward solutions instead of problems. And your mind will always follow the direction you give it. Your brain is like a GPS. It doesn't judge the destination. It just takes you there. If you keep telling it where you don't want to go, it will still take you there. But if you start asking better questions, giving better instructions, you change the destination. Instead of saying, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what can I do differently right now? That single shift changes your emotional state instantly. This is not about positive thinking. It's about intentional thinking. It's about catching the old patterns and upgrading them. When you hear yourself say, I can't handle this, interrupt it. Replace it with, I've handled worse. When you catch, I'm not good enough, shift it to, I'm improving every day. These are not affirmations. They're recalibrations. At first, it may feel unnatural. That's normal. You're changing a pattern that's been reinforced for years, but repetition creates belief. And belief creates results. The more you practice speaking with strength, clarity, and direction, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, your inner dialogue stops being your enemy and becomes your coach. And here's the most important part. When you change the way you talk to yourself, you change what you believe is possible. When possibility expands, action follows. And when action follows consistently, your destiny shifts. Because the voice you listen to the most will determine the life you live. And the moment you take control, that voice, you take control of your future. There is a kind of weight that doesn't show up on the outside, but you feel it every single day. It's the emotional weight you've been carrying, anger that never found a release, guilt that keeps replaying, resentment that quietly poisons your thoughts, fear that keeps you on edge. These emotions don't shout. They sit inside you, draining your energy, shaping your reactions and influencing your choices without asking for permission. Most people believe holding on to these emotions gives them strength. They think anger keeps them protected. Guilt keeps them responsible. Resentment keeps them from being taken advantage of, and fear keeps them safe. But what actually happens is the opposite. These attachments don't protect you, they control you. They keep you tied to people, moments, and experiences that no longer exist in your life, yet still dictate how you feel today. Think about it. Every time you feel triggered by something small, it's rarely about what's happening now. It's about something unresolved from before. The reaction is bigger than the moment because the emotion has been stored, not released. And over time, these stored emotions become part of your emotional identity. You start saying things like, that's just how I am, when in reality, that's just what you've been holding on to. Anger, for example, can feel empowering in the moment. It gives you a sense of control. But the truth is, it keeps you connected to the very thing you're trying to escape. You're still emotionally tied to the person who hurt you, the situa that wronged you, or the moment that felt unfair. And as long as that connection exists, you're not free. Guilt works the same way. It convinces you that punishing yourself is the same as being accountable. But growth doesn't come from self-attack. It comes from self-awareness and choice. When guilt lingers, it doesn't make you better. It makes you hesitant. It keeps you looking backward instead of stepping forward. And resentment may be the most dangerous attachment of all, because resentment feels justified. You replay the story, you list the reasons, and you convince yourself that letting go would mean they get away with it. But here's the reality. Resentment doesn't punish them, it punishes you. It steals your peace, your focus, your presence. It colors your perception and keeps your nervous system locked in defense mode. Letting go does not mean approving what happened. It does not mean forgetting or minimizing the pain. It means choosing to stop carrying what is hurting you. It means deciding that your energy is more valuable than your anger, that your future matters more than your resentment, that your peace is worth more than staying emotionally tied to the past. See, people wait for an apology that may never come. They wait for closure from someone else. But closure is not something you receive. It's something you create. The moment you realize you don't need anyone else to change for you to be free, you take your power back. Fear is another attachment that quietly shapes lives. Fear of being hurt again, fear of being judged, fear of failing, fear of success. And because fear feels protective, people listen to it. They call it caution. But fear doesn't ask, what do you want? It asks, what if something goes wrong? And when fear leads, potential follows at a distance. Releasing these emotional attachments doesn't happen by force. You don't rip them out. You replace them. You replace anger with understanding, not for them, but for yourself. You replace guilt with responsibility and self-respect. You replace resentment with boundaries. And you replace fear with faith, not blind faith, but faith in your ability to adapt, learn, and grow. It starts with awareness. Next time you feel an intense emotional reaction, pause and ask, what am I really holding on to? That question alone creates distance. And in that distance, you can choose a new response. You can decide not to rehearse the emotion, not to feed it with stories, not to let it define the moment. Over time, something powerful happens. Your emotional state becomes lighter. Your reactions become your decisions become clearer. Not because life stopped being challenging, but because you stopped carrying emotional baggage into every situation. And when you finally release what no longer serves you, you discover a truth most people never experience. That letting go isn't losing anything at all. It's reclaiming your freedom. When people hear the words let go, they often imagine something disappearing and leaving a void behind. And that's exactly where many get stuck. They work to remove negativity, old habits, toxic patterns, destructive behaviors, but they don't replace them with anything new. And when nothing takes its place, the old patterns find a way back in. Because the truth is, your mind and body are designed to follow routines. And if you don't intentionally choose empowering ones, you'll default to the familiar. Even if it hurts, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. Habits are the invisible architecture of your life. They shape how you think, how you feel, how you show up when no one is watching. And once you remove negative influences, the next question becomes critical. What are you installing in their place? Negativity is not just a mindset. It's a pattern of behavior. It's how you start your mornings, how you respond to stress, how you recover from setbacks. If your old pattern was waking up and immediately checking your phone, scrolling through news or social media, and flooding your nervous system with comparison and chaos, removing that habit without replacing it leaves your mind restless. It searches for stimulation, and often it finds the old path again. Empowering habits don't need to be complicated, but they must be consistent. Small actions done daily rewire your emotional state. Something as simple as starting your day with gratitude changes the lens through which you view everything that follows. When you intentionally acknowledge what's working, what you appreciate, what you're proud of, even briefly, you shift your focus from scarcity to possibility, and that shift changes how you act. Movement is another powerful replacement. Stress, frustration, and fear are stored in the body. If you don't move your body, those emotions stay trapped. When you move, whether it's walking, stretching, training, or simply breathing deeply, you signal to your nervous system that you're safe, capable, and alive. Energy moves emotion. And when your energy changes, your perspective changes. Discipline is often misunderstood as restriction, but real discipline is freedom. When you build rituals that strengthen you, consistent sleep, hydration, focused work, learning, you reduce decision fatigue. You don't waste energy negotiating with yourself. You create momentum, and momentum builds confidence, not through words, but through evidence. One of the most important habits to replace negativity with is intentional input. What you listen to, what you watch, what you read, and who you spend time with all shape your emotional state. If you constantly feed your mind content that reinforces fear, drama, and limitation, it doesn't matter how positive you try to think. Your environment will always win. You must curate your inputs the same way you protect your physical health. Empowering habits also include how you speak, how you respond, and how you recover. Recovery is a habit. High performers don't avoid setbacks. They bounce back faster. They have rituals that reset their state after a tough day or a disappointment. That might be journaling, reflection, prayer, silence, or creative expression. The specific habit matters less than the consistency of returning to center. Many people wait for motivation to build habits, but motivation is unreliable. Habits built on emotion fall apart when emotion fades. Habits built on identity endure. When you begin to see yourself as someone who honors their commitments, who takes care of their energy, who responds intentionally instead of reactively, your behaviors naturally align with that identity. And remember, replacement doesn't mean perfection. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. One new empowering habit can begin to shift everything. One ritual that grounds you. One action that strengthens you. One choice that reminds you who you're becoming. Because when you consciously replace what you remove, you don't just avoid going backward. You create a system that pulls you forward. And in that system, negativity no longer has space to take root, because your life is filled with habits that support the person you're choosing to become. There comes a moment in every person's life when information is no longer enough. Insight is no longer enough. Even inspiration is no longer enough. Nothing truly changes until you decide. Not wish, not hope, decide. And that decision is not about what you want. It's about who you are becoming. Most people spend their lives trying to change their outcomes without changing their identity. They say they want more confidence, more success, more fulfillment, but they keep holding on to the version of themselves that created their current reality. And that creates internal conflict, because the future you want demands a different standard than the past you've been living. Your life is shaped by the standards you tolerate. What you tolerate, you reinforce. And what you reinforce becomes your normal. If you tolerate negative self-talk, draining relationships, inconsistent effort, or low expectations, you don't need a new strategy. You need a new standard. And standards change in a moment, but only when the decision behind them is absolute. A real decision cuts off alternatives. It's not I'll try, it's this is who I am now. When you decide who you are becoming, your behaviors begin to align automatically. You don't wake up every day negotiating with yourself. You act from identity. You move from clarity, and clarity creates power. Most people wait for confidence before they act, but confidence is the result of keeping promises to yourself. It's built through consistent action aligned with a new identity. The moment you decide, I am someone who shows up, your actions start to prove it, and each follow-through reinforces the identity until it becomes unshakable. Becoming a new version of yourself requires letting go of the old one. That means releasing outdated labels, old excuses, and stories that no longer serve you. It means no longer introducing yourself to the world or to yourself through your past failures or limitations. The past may have shaped you, but it does not get to define you unless you allow it to. Here's the truth most people avoid. The life you want is on the other side of discomfort, not unbearable discomfort, but the discomfort of growth. The discomfort of doing what's unfamiliar, the discomfort of raising your standards and honoring them even when it would be easier not to. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a signal you're evolving. When you decide who you are becoming, you also decide what you will no longer accept. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop negotiating your values. You stop shrinking to fit environments that don't match your future. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. And alignment brings a new kind of peace. Because when your actions match your values, your energy stops leaking. You're no longer pulled in different directions. You're no longer living in contradiction. You become focused, grounded, certain. This decision doesn't require a perfect plan. It requires commitment. Plans will evolve, circumstances will change, but commit. Meant to your identity keeps you moving forward when motivation fades. You don't need to know every step. You just need to know who you're walking as. The most powerful moment is not when everything is clear. It's when you decide anyway. When you say, from this moment on, I live by a new standard. That decision becomes the anchor you return to when challenges arise. It becomes the reference point for every choice. And one day you look back and realize something extraordinary. The life you once hoped for became possible not because the world changed, but because you did, because you decided, because you let go of who you were and stepped fully into who you are meant to be. And that decision begins now.